Welcome back. So opposition parties in Namibia want to challenge the validity of the elections. This after voting was marred by delays at polling stations in some parts of the country. The Electoral Commission in Namibia was forced to extend voting days. The decision to add voting days has also been criticized as illegal. Well, joining us is Shelleygan Petersen, who is a journalist based in Namibia. Shelleygan, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been watching these elections very closely. 1.4 Namibians set to queue up and make their mark. And of course, a tense end of the week for Namibia. Talk to us about, I suppose, the feeling around this election at this point.
Yeah. Good morning, lady. It's been quite intense, but also from the voters' side, it's been a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion. I mean, voters stood up as early as, or they were queuing up the night before. By 11 p.m., there were people at some of the polling stations. Some of these people stood for over 12 hours in a queue, waiting for either ballot papers. So it was a lot of frustration from the voter side. And from the stakeholders in terms of the Electoral Commission, the opposition parties, their relationship with ECN has soured over the last few days. So there's a lot of hostility from both sides. I'm not sure if you saw, at one point the opposition parties occupied the boardroom of the Electoral Commission and barred them from entering the boardroom because they feel like the Electoral Commission is not taking them seriously. So in terms of that relationship, there's a lot of hostility. But from the voters, a lot of frustration, a lot of trying to understand what's happening. And then you have sort of the other parts of the voters who are the lawyers, the legal minds, and they just honestly feel, or they've related to us, that they feel like the ECN is eroding Namibia's reputation in terms of election. They've called them incompetent at some point, especially after the amendment to the proclamation of the president.
Yeah, but what's particularly interesting, and of course you talk about some of those opposition parties saying ECN, that's the Electoral Commission of Namibia, asking them as well to cease the counting of votes. But what really stands out here is you've got SWAPO, for instance, a party that's been in power all the way since 1990 with the independence of Namibia. For the very first time, one could argue, and you'll clarify that for me, possibly not having what some would expect to be a more outright sort of victory in this election.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, for the first time, our opposition parties are united against this one force, and with everything going on, it affects all political parties essentially. The frustration from voters, the lack of ballot papers, lack of polling stations. All of that speaks to all political parties. You've had the ruling party's Youth League come out and say they are also frustrated with the Electoral Commission, but not at one point did you hear the ruling party complain, that the ruling party have any objections to what's happening. We had almost a moment of a brief conversation with the Secretary General of the SWAPO Party, Sophia Sheningwa, and no words did she express in terms of how she feels about the election, how they feel like the administration has gone on. But you have had the observers scrutinize and grill the Electoral Commission for the lack of ballot paper management, for the lack of enough polling stations. The professionalism of the polling officials have also been under the microscope, saying that you can see that the experience is not there, but it's good that they did hire young people. You have a point of sort of a crest of what will happen in Namibia. Everyone is waiting with bated breath. From the opposition parties, you have heard them say We are trying to consult our lawyers. We have all the options on the table, but not say a peep as to what the course of action will be. We did hear earlier, in the earlier days, I think the evening of the 27th of November, the political parties say, listen, we can't just go to court without exploring all avenues. You need to show that you have tried to have discourse with ECN and try all options before you come to court. So I think that's the point where they are at. We have seen a letter written to our ombudsman from private citizens about this issue. But yeah, I mean, even with the results coming out, you see the ruling party and the independent Patriots for Change sort of being neck on neck in certain regions. But even then, there's a question to the counting is going on, the results are released. How is this influencing voters currently who are standing in the queues, who are waiting to still cast their ballot?
We know. What's interesting is, of course, we're all SADC members, and we're watching exactly what's happening in the various elections. Certainly, we had our election this year that was quite the turning point, right, in terms of what happens to the party that really has been ruling for a very long time. In Mozambique, though, for instance, it's not going very well. And it's interesting because what's come up, and now in Namibia, a similar sort of wording around how this election went. In Mozambique, allegations around whether or not there were Zimbabwean nationals that were voting in that election. Of course, those allegations denied. And then perhaps you can give us details around this incident where it's believed that the SWAPO Secretary General and IPC spokesperson getting into quite a bit of an exchange there. And this IPC spokesperson calling Shinangwa of SWAPO a ZANU-PF thug. What was happening there, and why do you think that particular wording was used?
Yes, our news organization, the Namibian, recently wrote a story regarding the influence of ZANU-PF officials in SADC elections, and there was a lot of sort of strings and attached to how the travels of SWAPO officials, the travels of ZANU-PF officials to Namibia, allegations of them being involved and using tactics. There've been allegations around and that's what the IPC spokesperson Eames Nashinge said. He alleged that SWAPO and ECN are colluding and using the same ZANU-PF tactics, if you could say, in the Namibian elections. And during that heated discussion, it stemmed from the ECN ushering the Secretary General of the SWAPO Party, Sophia Shaningwa, from the entrance to the second floor, where all the political parties were said to meet. The parties and the ECN have a committee called the Political Liaison Committee. Now, they were said to have a meeting at 12 p.m. on that day, but it didn't happen because of the commotion that took place. So the political parties did not find it in any way funny or any way okay that the Electoral Commission officers ushered the Secretary General to the second floor, while all the other Secretary Generals, all the other representatives of parties were in the lobby. That's where it stemmed from. When they rushed up to the second floor and they were questioning ECN, why would you show why would you show favoritism to the ruling party Secretary General, while the rest of us are all at the lobby waiting? And that heated discussion took place when the spokesperson said, this woman, why is this woman allowed? And the Secretary General's words in return were that your mother's also a woman. So that was the interaction. But there was there was intense conversations, shouting happening during that incident. And that's how it's been ever since that altercation, or since that heated discussion, argument at the Electoral Commission. You have not seen the ECN or the political parties reach out to each other or have a conversations ever since. This has been 48 hours later, and yet the ECN is allegedly still said to have a conversation with these political parties.
So what's the discourse then of the voters, right? What you make sense of the voters' view right now: irritation, frustration, patience. You know, and we've seen the flare-ups in Mozambique, for instance. Can we expect similar sort of frustrations from the everyday Namibian?
Looking at trends of how Namibians are, to be honest, number one, Namibians are very, very peaceful. We will choose peace over anything. And then this is what we see here. Political parties have, not in so many words, but hinted to Namibians, this is the time where you need to take up arms. This is the time you need to go to the streets because your democracy is at risk. Namibians still went back yesterday and today to go vote. As you said, voting was extended to yesterday and today. The queues are still very long. One of our reporters just updated us about the polling station. We have one polling station in the capital city, and at that polling station since yesterday at 7 a.m. that line has not gotten any shorter. In fact, it has grown in length. It has extended beyond 100 meters from the polling station. So that shows the resilience that Namibians have. But in terms of going to the streets and demonstrating, I don't think that will happen unless the political parties themselves mobilize people and go to homes and ask people to stand up. We've had two political party leaders on the night of the 27th say, listen, Namibians, get up, do something. Namibians have been complaining on social media platforms, but in terms of taking the streets, I don't really foresee that unless something drastic happens over the next 2 or 3 days.